I'm just going to be honest. I know most people don't give one flying hoot about the Dewey Decimal System, but despite the uphill battle I may be climbing, I do plan to do a series on it. I challenge you to watch it and see if you don't become interested too. Hi there, I'm Library Lynn, and I make knowing great nonfiction books my mission. Don't know what to read next? I always have ideas. I'm not in a race to be the first to read anything, so the books I read have been around for a while. When I do book reviews, I usually talk about books I've enjoyed, but to be honest, most of those books were already either award winners or recommended books that I've studied. But when you go into a library and browse the shelves, you aren't looking at a collection of only award winners. You're looking at books that have been purchased because other patrons requested them or because the librarian tasked with ordering the books thought it looked like something that might benefit the community. And that's a good thing in my opinion. Libraries serve all kinds of people. And here's something else I'd like to make plain. Just because a book hasn't won an award or been on a recommended books list doesn't mean that it's not a good book. It may be the perfect book for you. So what does this have to do with Dewey? Well, I'm addressing people who would like to use libraries but may feel a little bit intimidated. It helps before you go into a library if you have some sort of idea of how the books are arranged and even what sorts of books you might find there. For someone who doesn't spend a lot of time in a library, the initial experience can be a little daunting. You walk in and everyone seems to have their heads down and they're busy, or they seem to know where they're going. Of course, if you know what you want to read, say a cookbook, you can ask a librarian. But what if you're just looking for a good book to read and don't know where to start? If it's fiction, you go to the fiction section, of course. It's clearly marked and the books are in order by the author's last name. What if nonfiction is your thing? What sorts of nonfiction books do libraries have? How are they arranged? That's what I'm going to talk about in this series. And don't worry, I'm not going to give you a worksheet to complete when we're done. Today's video is just an overall introduction, and I'm going to keep it brief. I'm going to introduce the 10 main Dewey Decimal Classification divisions, and I'm going to show one example of one book from each of those divisions. The books were taken from the collection of books that I have laying around my house. I hope that when you're reminded of the books that you can find for free in your library, that you'll be tempted to go and check one out. So here are the 10 major Dewey Decimal Classification divisions. In future videos, I'm going to dive deeper into the types of books you can find within each one of these divisions. Don't worry, I'm not going to go super nerd on you and explain the decimals themselves. This is a guide to browsing shelves, not for shelving books. Well, let me stop right here. You notice that there were 10 divisions and they go from the number 0 to the number 999. That means that there are 1,000 basic subdivisions that you can find books in. So that's a lot. We're not going to get into a lot of detail. I'm just hoping to convince you to use your library. Call numbers 000 to 099. This is where you'll find the general knowledge section. And this is what it sounds like. It's books about books, books about libraries, books about information and computer systems. The general encyclopedias go here, and so do books on journalism. The example I have from my home collection is The Shelf, Adventures in Extreme Reading by Phyllis Rose, who writes and edits books on authors and women. She also wrote one on the jazz great Josephine Baker, which sounds like a really good book to me. For this book, she went to the New York Society Library, which is not a public library. It's a paid membership library. She decided that she would read every book on one random shelf and then write a book about what she learned. She had no idea whether the books would be awesome or awful. And it didn't really matter. She was committed to plowing through all of them. She chose the fiction section and the shelf labeled LEQ through LES. She calls her adventure off-road or extreme reading. I found the recount of her adventures absolutely delightful. And what a fun game for a book lover to play. At age 13, I played a game of my own this way. I would go into the library to the nonfiction section and I would pick a book off one shelf and I would read it. and then I would pick a book off the next shelf. I mean, I could pick any book I wanted. I didn't have to read them all, but I picked one book off each shelf until I got tired of playing the game. And then I did the same thing again when I grew up and had kids. I was a stay-at-home mom for a while. I would go to the public library and do the same thing with the fiction books. I would pick a book off a shelf. Next time I would go in, I'd pick the book off the next shelf and so on. It was fun. The next section is 100 to 199, and that's the philosophy and the psychology section. Since psychology as a field of study was new when Melville Dewey was designing his system, it only takes up 1/10 of the numbers in this section. The rest is devoted to philosophy. In most libraries today, the number of psychology books far outnumber the number of philosophy books. The book I chose for my personal collection is a psychology book. It's The War of Art, Break Through the Blocks and Win Your Inner Battles by Steven Pressfield. You may be familiar with this book if you're an artistic sort or if you write. This book has been covered many times by other people, so I won't go into detail here, but I've read it several times. It's a very short guide on how author Steven Pressfield trained himself to stop being a dabbler, a wannabe author, to someone who rolls up his sleeves and gets the work done. Honestly, I found his no-nonsense approach one of the most inspiring books I've ever read. It has a great reputation and has been covered by a lot of people for a reason. The 200 to 299 is the religion section. Again, because of the time and place in which Dewey lived, he based it on his own culture. And because that was predominantly Christian, 70% of the call numbers in this section are reserved for Christianity alone. And it's important to understand that, though, that there is a place for every religion. Nothing's left out. The book I chose for this section may surprise you. It's Mythology by Edith Hamilton, which is a classic book of Greek mythology published in 1942. It has retellings of the myths about the gods and the demigods and the mortals that encounter them. She also has charts in the back to help you understand their relationships with each other. People are sometimes surprised to find that books about myths, which are equated with something untrue, is in the nonfiction section. But when you understand that they are religious stories, it makes sense that they are shelved with religion books and not in the fiction section. When we talk about the religion section in a completely different video, I'll discuss some of the issues with this section. It does tend to be a bit controversial. Moving on to the 300 to 399 division is for social sciences. This tends to be a big section in most libraries because it covers a lot of territory. It covers relationships between races, sexes, genders. It also covers law, politics, economics, the military, social problems like crime, education, transportation, manners, and folk tales. That's a lot, and that's not all it covers. While I think this is a fascinating division, I don't personally have a lot of books from it in my own collection. The book I chose to look at is How to Become a Straight A Student: The Unconventional Strategies Real College Students Use to Score High While Studying Less by Cal Newport. Newport has written a similar book for high school students, and he walked his talk. He graduated from Dartmouth College and earned a PhD from MIT. In this book, which would make a great gift for a high school student or a college freshman, he gives advice not just on how to study for exams or write professor impressive papers, but also just general advice on being healthy and maintaining a good social life while you're also making good grades. It's a short book with lots of practical advice in its pages. The 400 to 499 section is languages. This is every language in the world, though most libraries concentrate on books in just a few languages. In the U.S., of course, most libraries have lots of dictionaries and usage guides for English. There may also be additional books, possibly Spanish, French, Latin, or German. But if there's a local community of, say, Vietnamese immigrants, there may be a good collection of books on their native language as well. It just depends on where you are. I've read very few books from this section. I've read word by word The Secret Life of Dictionaries by Corey Stamper with a link to my review here. But the book I want to show you is The McGraw-Hill Handbook of English Grammar and Usage by Mark Lester and Larry Beeson. I had to use this book for a grammar refresh course I took about 3 years ago, and I found it easy to understand and at times entertaining. While I can't claim to write perfectly, I'm much more confident about where to place my commas these days. Language constantly changes, so if you use a lot of written communication, it may be handy to buy a guide like this occasionally. They also make riveting reading if you're fascinated by gerunds. I'm joking, of course. In 500 to 599, you'll find the natural sciences section. And that's where you'll find, well, stuff about the natural world. But some things may surprise you. Math and chemistry books go here, along with paleontology and biology books. I don't have tons of books from this division in my home, but one that I did read last year was Entangled Lives: How Fungi Make Our Worlds, Change Our Minds, and Shape Our Futures. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I've always been a mushroom fan, but it turns out that fungi is more ubiquitous than mushrooms. They're everywhere. Sheldrake is one of their biggest fans, and he makes them fascinating for the rest of us. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that alcohol can be made by leaving fruit juice out in a library of old books. The fungi is just hanging about, it turns out, just waiting for a chance to start a party. 600 to 699 is the Applied Science and Technology division. You probably expect to find books on medicine and engineering here, and you do, but it's also where you find cookbooks and books on business and all kinds of hobbies. The book I picked from here is The End of Alzheimer's Program, the first protocol to enhance cognition and reverse decline at any age by Dale E. Bredesen. It focuses on diet, exercise, sleep, and stress. And using the most recent research as of 2020 when it was published, it tells of supplements that may be useful with an eye toward preventing the disease and actually reversing it if you catch it early enough. I thought the book was really interesting and was inspired to try some of the interventions myself. I can only hope they're helping. 700 to 799 is the Arts and Recreation division. If you're artistic in any sense of the word, you may find something for you here. But there are also books on music, stage and screen, gaming, comics, and sports that can be enjoyed both indoors and out. I think of it as the library's fun section. One of the books from this section that I have at home is The Artist's Way, A Spiritual Path to Higher Creativity by Julia Cameron. I haven't finished this book. I started it when I was feeling stuck and not knowing what to do with myself about 4 years ago. In the book, Cameron leads you through inspirational readings and assigns projects and activities for you to do to get your creativity flowing again. I got halfway through when I realized that what I really want to do is explore nonfiction books and talk about the books I find with people. I began doing research for my first book at that point, and I never went back to finish Cameron's book. I'll probably do it again if I get stuck, but for right now, I'm too busy doing what I love to finish. And I think that's a pretty good recommendation for that book right there. The 800 to 899 division is the literature books. As you know, literature is any form of written language that is so well done it could be considered artistic. There are books in this division on how to write for all sorts of reasons and in all sorts of formats. There's poetry, plays, novels, stories, essays, and miscellaneous writings in every language from all over the world. Of course, what your library has will depend on their budget and the clientele they serve. I have a good handful of books from this section in my home collection, but here's one I enjoyed. What Editors Do: Art, Craft, and Business of Book Editing, which is edited by Peter Jenna. This book was published by the University of Chicago Press, which is famous for its books on writing and publishing. Writers may know about it because of the Chicago Manual of Style. Jenna's book is an anthology of treatments on all sorts of editorial topics, like how publishers find the right books to publish, how authors and editors relate to each other, special editing concerns for different types of books, because they all have their own conventions, and different editorial careers a person can pursue. I bought it because for a while I was considering becoming a copy editor myself, but once I decided I wanted to research and write books instead, I've never looked back. And the last division that you will find in the Dewey Decimal Classification system is 900 to 999, and that is the Geography, Biography, and History division. Biography can get dicey, and I'll go into more detail on that in a later video. But for now, I'll just say this covers the entire planet and beyond in its history sections and geography sections. The book I chose from here is A Voyage Long and Strange, Rediscovering the New World by Tony Horwitz. I read this book a couple of years ago and I absolutely loved it. Years ago, I went to see Plymouth Rock with my parents. I won't spoil the surprise for you if you've never been there, but let's just say that I was surprised by what I found. Years later, Horwitz did the same thing and had the same reaction I did. But while I just shrugged my shoulders and moved on, Horwitz decided to travel around North America and the Caribbean to see if anything else in American lore was different from common understandings. Turns out a lot is different. He goes to places and digs in the archives and visits the libraries and talks to the people to uncover what was different and why. He changed the way I saw American history while keeping me entertained. If you don't mind having the truth shake up your worldview, I'd say give it a try. Okay. Thank you for staying with me to the end. Do you love browsing through books in your public library? Do you have a favorite Dewey division? Or, like me, do you have a small library in your own home? If so, let me know in the comments below. For more nonfiction books, check out my book, Library Lynn's curated collection of superlative nonfiction. It contains hundreds of pages of award-winning and recommended books arranged in Dewey Decimal Classification system. You're sure to find something to pique your interests. And if you enjoyed this video, take a second to hit like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you'll always have new videos to watch on nonfiction topics like this one. Another announcement, my newest edition of Library Lynn's Top 10 Superlative Nonfiction is available now on my website. I went through 65 award-winning and expert recommended books lists for the year 2022, which is the most recent lists available. So a link in the description box below. That's it for today. Until next time, happy reading.